Hi, everybody. I'm Melinda Gallant, and I want to welcome you to a very special Cape Conversations. We're going to be talking about a lot of terrific things. Yes, we are. All about the town of Sandwich. We're going to be talking to the town manager. We're going to talk to somebody from the business community, and we're going to talk to the wastewater coordinator. And we all know him, and you'll recognize him when you see him. So come along. Let's have another Cape Conversations. Hi, everybody. I'm Melinda Gallant. Oh, wow. Do we have a town show for you today? We've got the big guns from Sandwich in the studio. I'm so excited. So we have with us Bev Comeau, who is, by the way, one of the best realtors on Cape Cod. And are you the premier realtor in Sandwich? Or are you just on a lot of stuff?
I just have been around a while.
That's a good reason to have you here. And then we also have the wastewater coordinator, who used to be the head of other stuff, Dave Mason.
Good morning.
Good morning. And then, of course, the grand poobah himself, Bud Dunham, who is the town manager. Welcome to Cape Conversations. And we have, I hope we can make it fun, but it is a serious topic. And it's a serious topic that we all need to think about a lot about, because we're going to be asking the people to come out and vote one way or the other for it. So that said, Dave, we're here to talk about wastewater, one of my favorite subjects. Since I was a shopping center manager and actually oversaw two of them, it's all about the you-know-what. So that said, Dave, why do we need a wastewater system in Sandwich?
Well, we have a wastewater management program plan, and we need wastewater to deal with different areas of town, like downtown. We want wastewater treatment and sewering for reasons for high groundwater and density and redevelopment. So there's many reasons down there, and poor soil conditions, like out on Town Neck. And then there's other areas of town that we're looking at because we contribute to impaired estuaries in the towns of Falmouth and Mashpee and Barnstable.
So, and I'm going to get to the two of you in just a sec. So, Dave, I live in Town Neck.
Yep.
And it's funny when you look at your, we just paid off our house, so we have our deed and all that stuff. And I was reading all the stuff about it. And, it was won in a poker game, I think. The lots were $35. Now they're going for $1.4 million, which makes no sense to me. And when we moved in there, the story was from the old timers who had lived there a long time, that when they dug the canal, that's where they put the dirt, and that there was no land reclamation, I think that might be the right term, and so the topsoil all ran down. So literally, I'm not kidding you, I can throw a seed in my backyard and it'll grow. I don't need to, you dig down, it's not sandy, it's black soil, but on top, on the other side, it's all clay.
Right.
And that's where that problem comes in, correct?
Yes. So there's clay that doesn't provide adequate drainage. And at the same time, those systems that are discharging do discharge into Scorton Creek.
Right.
And so, we're running the town is running a shellfish program there now. And so, one, because of the cost of the systems, because of the clay, typically, it's not unusual to have a system that costs $30,000 out there. And that's even for a repair of an existing system. So there's been needs for years identified going back to the 70s to sewer that area.
Right, right. And there was a town committee to do this, wasn't there, back then?
There's been numerous town committees over the years.
I've heard from Christy Lawrence.
Yeah, there's been numerous town committees and each of them saying, we need to, this wastewater issue needs to be addressed immediately since the 70s.
Right. So is that why we have so many phragmites in the marsh?
Well, the phragmites are there. One, it's an invasive species. Two, because of the nutrients that are going in there.
Right.
Also.
Continually feeding it.
Correct.
Right. Behind my house, the town thought I had a water view. I don't have a water view. I have a phragmite view. So We got a little knockoff on our taxes. That said, that brings me to you, Bud. So tell me, how does this all work?
Yeah, so the Water Infrastructure Investment Fund, or WIF, was something that...
Wait a minute, what's it
So we
called?
call it the WIF,
WIIF.
WIIF.
Perfect name.
Striking out in baseball and wastewater.
Well, or a
So-
whiff of something.
So what's interesting is Sandwich was ahead of its time in the sense we were the first city or town in the entire state that adopted the parts of the general laws that allowed the townspeople to voluntarily charge themselves an extra surcharge on their tax bill so we could put that money away for wastewater needs. And what was important at the time is we recognized, as
When was
Dave
this?
said, I think we adopted it in roughly 2019.
Yep.
Okay.
And and it took some time for it to actually go into effect. So I think we've been collecting funds on it for roughly 5 years. What's unique is that the Cape in particular, and I'm going to screw up the percentages, but the Cape Cod Commission has taught us over time. I think even though the Cape has, less than 5% of the overall Massachusetts population, we have more than 25% of the septic systems in the entire Commonwealth.
Right,
And so the state, as I'm sure Dave could explain better, through DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, recently adopted some nitrogen-sensitive area regulations just for Cape Cod. And we knew it was coming, and what it's going to do is it's going to force all 15 towns on the Cape to address the nitrogen loading that's happened over time. So by having this Water Infrastructure Investment Fund surcharge, the funds that we're collecting enable us to pay for certain engineering work, design of conveyance systems, eventually a treatment plant to help pay for that. The cost for all this work is staggering, and I'm sure people have heard.
Oh, I'm sure.
People have heard the numbers throughout the Cape for literally 2 decades now. And you drive around Barnstable and you see the roads being ripped up as they expand their sewer system. It's not uncommon, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are the
Right.
total costs over the years to address this problem. Fortunately, compared to other towns, Sandwich, I think, is probably the second or third lowest on the whole Cape in terms of what we have to address. Because most of our water flows towards the north, Cape Cod Bay, which is not impaired right now, which is good. Our water that flows towards the south, as Dave said, in Mashpee, Barnstable, and Falmouth, there's certain parts that we're going to be responsible for. So
Can I just interrupt you? Is that towards Wacoit Bay? Because I used to sit on a committee on
Yep.
the Cape Cod Chamber about wastewater.
So our 3 areas are
And-
Wacoit
and
Bay in
Wacoit
Falmouth,
Bay, yeah.
Pompanesett Bay in Mashpee, and 3 bays in Barnstable. So we have agreements with those 3 towns that Sandwich is going to have to address problems in our town to help solve the impacts that happen in their communities. So it's something that I think all the towns on Cape Cod have been working together on for many, many years. And so the WIF basically enables us to have a funding source to do a lot of the preliminary planning work and some of the initial implementation. The numbers are so big, as we've all heard, you can't fund everything through the WIF. There's going to have to be debt exclusions over time that each town is going to have to address. Last fall, I think Yarmouth and Dennis both did debt exclusions greater than $250 million just to address parts of their phase 1 plan. Our rough estimate on costs today, and this is really rough for Sandwich's phase 1, is about $220 million roughly. And so these WIF funds enable us to do a lot of the engineering work and the preliminary work to try to, and which I think we're going to talk about in a minute, but to try to get some relief from the state government and from the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, again, that will help hold down our costs.
I see.
But there's things we need to do engineering-wise and permitting-wise to be able to access those funds. So the WIF helps us do that.
So does this affect all residents of Sandwich or only certain areas?
So what's interesting is I think in all 3 phases of our wastewater plan that Dave mentioned, if you added up all the properties, it's less than a third of our properties. So we're very fortunate. There's some towns that are going to have to sewer 100% of their communities. We're on the lower side. And that's through all 3 phases. Phase 1 is much, much less than that even. So We plan to chip away on that, and it's literally a 40 or 50-year effort. It's not a 4 or
Oh my
5
God,
year
I'll be
effort.
dead.
Same.
We all will.
It's not going to be our problem then. But no, we want to try to set the
If my
people
kids
up.
keep the house, they'll
Yeah.
have to pay for it.
But we're trying to set the public up for the future, that they will say, thank you for doing this, because it's enabled us to be able to address a lot of these needs.
I see.
Because
And
if
there's
it
no
was
getting
done
out of it.
and if it was done during the 70s, we'd be thanking those people
Yeah.
Yeah,
at that
right.
point, because we'd have something to build upon.
Right,
We're trying to
right.
create something that we can build upon
Right.
in order to protect the water resources and the
Right.
estuaries.
Well, Bev,
Yes.
since you sell real estate, water means nothing, does it, to Cape Cod?
Oh, it's the hottest topic around.
I'm sure it is.
It truly is. I
Yeah.
mean, people who come here, the reason that people come here to the Cape in general is the coastal environment that we're in. And to jeopardize that by having not so clean water,
Right.
not being able to swim in the ponds, not being able to fish and feel that what they're catching is edible. But all of those concerns are for people, the ones who live here are thinking about it as well, because they want to stay here and they want to protect the Cape for the future generation.
Sure.
But people coming here also, they're coming for those very reasons. So I'm extremely passionate on this subject, because for the last 2 years, the realtors were very well educated 2 years ago when the Mass DEP regulation came out.
And said you have to do this, right?
We are required to have a disclosure signed by our sellers and our buyers, whether the property falls within the nitrogen sensitive area or not. So it opens up education conversations with people. And ironically, the people, as you said, they're coming from areas where they're more used to municipal
Right.
Right.
wastewater
Right.
than private septic systems. So their biggest fear is, how do I maintain my system? What happens if it doesn't function anymore? Whereas the people who live here are concerned about what's going to be the cost to remediate this
Right.
problem.
Right.
And how am I going to pay for that? What's the cost going to be? The fear of the unknown. So it comes up in conversation.
Oh, I bet you it does. I bet you it does.
But it's so good to see the different perspectives too.
Sure, sure.
The people who live here versus the people who are coming here. It's a different perspective.
Well, I came from Ohio, right? And and I grew up on a farm. And we always laugh. We found out we weren't on. We had a well water and a septic system. I think I don't remember as a small child. I remember sometimes getting stopped up in the house, and we lived in a great big house, and my dad had to do certain things. But we found out that the cistern where our water was coming from was the runoff from the horse barn, which I always thought that's probably why I never had a broken bone. I had so much stuff in me that it just kept me from breaking, falling off horses. But I also, when I was married and we bought our first home, down the road along the river was the most beautiful park, and it was a wastewater treatment plant. And people back then went crazy and said, oh my God, it's going to smell, and it didn't. Now I know that, in Hyannis they've had, significant problems with that kind of stuff. That's very professional on my part. The smell coming from their wastewater treatment plant in the early days. But that's not going to happen here once we get that far, right?
No, it's not. And we're always conscious of people being aware of that example down in Hyannis as far as the type of design and the filtration systems associated with the air coming out of that. It's really just an older design, and I know they're working on it, but we're fully aware of concerns about that,
Right.
and we'll be addressing that.
Well, I have a septic system. It's now, oh my God, I think it's 15 to 20 years old. It was brand new put in. It's not above ground. It was the newest at the time then, right? There's no issues with it. We service it, and there's only 2 of us in the house now, which makes a huge difference. However, that said, does that mean I have to, if my septic system is working, do I have to not only chip in, but do I have to tie in?
Well, a couple different answers to that question as far as
because that's going to
chipping
be a
in.
big question for you
Yep,
guys.
no, understood, and I think chipping in is is more of a tax question.
Yes.
And as far as tying in, I'll take that first.
Okay.
Depending upon where you are in town, yes. So at some point in time, there'll be people, we'll use the village area or in Town Neck as an example.
Yeah,
We
I live in Town Neck,
Yeah,
so it's
so we
perfect.
bring in sewer down there, and there'll be a time frame issued, as far as being required to tie into that system, because the
And it'll be my responsibility or the town to tie us in?
it will be the homeowner's responsibility to tie in, just as it is,
Right.
as by example in Hyannis or
Yeah, I'm just-
Barnstable.
yeah,
No,
okay.
just explain, because people
Yeah.
don't understand that.
Okay.
So there'll be contractors associated with that
Yeah.
that'll do the tie-in at that point.
Yeah.
So, because that becomes part of, one, the need for what we're trying to clean up, and two, as far as it becomes, one, we need to clean this up, two, that it becomes part of the building of the cost and paying for the system also.
Okay,
I think when we look at it, virtually every city and town across the country, not just in Massachusetts, the way they typically address wastewater is the community as a whole pays for the large infrastructure, the treatment plant, the collection system.
that's everybody in the, all
Everyone in the whole
residents.
town, even if you don't need to connect to sewering. But once the sewer line goes past your house, and if you're in one of those areas that has to upgrade, in a way you're getting to avoid having to replace your septic system down the road, and by connecting into the sewer line, you sort of address that need for a long, long time, and you would just pay based on your flow, your
Right.
actual flow, as opposed to like having to replace a whole system.
And is that how it's going to be charged? And usually that's through the water department in other states. I don't know how they do it here.
Yeah, right now I think our plan is we don't want to hire a new town staff to oversee any of this.
Yeah.
We want to run it through a private contractor that specializes in running a wastewater treatment plant.
Right.
And so similar to your water example,
Right.
there would have to be meters that would gauge, how much
Wow.
water or how much gets used, and you would get charged on a per gallon basis.
Okay.
On
So
the
similar
use.
to a restaurant in a shopping center, it's per seat. They
Yeah.
do 40 gallons per seat. That's how they figure out how much they have to pay.
Yeah. And
And it would be coordinated with the water district, because it's based
Right.
on the water use, as Bud said. So it would
Right.
be, whatever mechanism is set up in place to deal and charge with it would be coordinated with the water district relative to gallons per day, or quarterly as far as what's being used. at that
Right,
point.
okay.
But as far as, just to expand on that, relative to those people in town that aren't on sewer, because there are areas that will not be, but are paying for it. And the reason they're paying for it is, again, our plan is a comprehensive water resource management plan. Water resource management plan. That's for drinking water, that's for the pond water, that's for the estuaries.
I see.
So it covers all of that, and everyone benefits from that. And so this plan is being paid for by everyone. It
Sure,
needs to be.
sure.
So,
I think it's important to point out the WIFF, the Water Infrastructure Investment Fund portion.
It still makes me laugh.
The state law allowed towns to go up to a maximum of 3% for the surcharge.
Mm-hmm.
At the time when we adopted it, 5 or 6 years ago, we went with the 2%. And so what the vote that's before the public now would be to increase the 2% to 3%. As we see in our daily lives,
So it's an extra 1%.
yeah, so the cost for everything since COVID has increased so much for wastewater, the construction, all this stuff. So the extra 1%, which brings in roughly $750,000 a year to the town, would cost the average taxpayer $72 a year, in addition to the 2% they're already paying. So it's roughly for $72, we'd have more cash on hand to pay for services and improvements like dollar for dollar, instead of having to borrow money, which would cost more.
Right.
So in an odd way, by agreeing to charge ourselves a little bit more now, we're actually going to be saving everyone money, because they're not going to be asked for as many debt exclusions. And when I say asked, as you guys know from these state regulations, it's going to be required. If we
Well,
don't
yeah,
voluntarily
the
do
courts
it,
are going to get involved, correct?
something will
Yes.
happen where we have to pay for it. So it somewhat sounds counterintuitive, but I guess it would be knowing that your septic system's eventually going to fail, and none of us do it. What if we put aside $100 a month to help pay for it when it fails? not many of us do that, or none of us do
Well, who
that.
can in
No,
this
you can't.
day and
And so
age?
like that's sort of why the WIF makes sense, is because
Yeah.
we're putting aside a little bit of money that now to help pay for a bigger problem down the road. And I don't know how much you want me to continue on
No,
this
I want you
vein,
to.
but- so
I'm
this
going to say
is-
something to you, bud.
Yeah.
I think understanding what goes on and why we're doing it and how important it is to our economy, which is your part really, Bev, and reselling our homes and all of that. I think it's very important that you explain this to us and explain
Yeah.
it to me like a fourth grader, because that's
Yeah.
what I am mentally. Because I think people were shocked when they got their tax bills. I'm sorry to bring it up, but I think it's important that we are transparent about this, and that people, they're going, wait a minute, and now I have to pay more. And we don't pay as high as other places, but everybody thinks we do.
Yeah.
And we do have an absolutely beautiful community, and that's what we're paying for.
Yeah.
Let's face it. If we wanted to live, where there was a Mashpee Commons and more roadways and more state highways and more commercial, our taxes may be a little bit less, or what I'm saying. So I love where I live. So that said, I want you to explain it to me again. Why is it we
Yeah.
need this debt exclusion?
So
or not
here's-
debt exclusion.
Here's one of the
This
best.
1%.
So here's one of the best reasons we need it. There are federal laws that were set up, the Clean Water Act. So there's a thing called the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. So each state in the whole country gets to decide how they use federal funds to help address problems like water and wastewater. And so in Massachusetts, the department that oversees that, the so-called SRF, the State Revolving Fund, it enables towns to apply for funding. And if you get approved on that, it locks in a lower interest rate when you go to borrow the money.
I see.
So right now, for most of our work, we think it would be at 2.4%.
So it doesn't go by the going rate.
No, so 5 or 10 years ago, we could borrow on our own for less than that. So it wasn't as big a deal. Well, now if we borrowed, you'd be looking at 5+%
I
as
see.
interest rates have gone up.
Right.
So that, the volume of money we're having to borrow over time is going to be huge. So a slight change in the interest rate saves us all a lot of money over time.
Sure.
So that's one part of it. The other part to understand is about the only thing that the SRF applies to is actual construction. So all the engineering design work the town has to fund on their own 100%.
see.
So the nice part about the WIF is that would give us the cash to be able to do all the engineering work, to go to bidding, and there's a lot that's involved. If you think about laying sewer pipes and designing a system.
And where you're going
It's
to put it, if you
amazing.
do a plan, where
Exactly.
you're going to put it, because you have to think ahead
Exactly.
for that, right?
So the more money we have on hand to pay for that engineering, because we're not getting the low interest loans, we're not getting the other assistance, that saves us all money over time. The other really important thing, the state to its credit, and I know the realtors were instrumental in helping with this, the short-term rentals, when those started to happen and people saw what, Vrbo and Airbnb and people were charging for someone to rent their home for a week.
I have
all
6
this
on my
money,
street, bud.
Yeah, all this money was going to different sources. And so I think the state wisely said on Cape Cod, because you have such wastewater problems, and because we're going to adopt regulations only for you, not in any other part of the state, we're going to charge those people an extra 2.75%. That money's going to be given to the county to create this wastewater and water protection fund, which I'm
So
the
is it a
town's
tax?
representative. Yeah, so it's already been going in. And the
Okay,
nice part
so the
is,
question is, I'm going to interrupt you just a second, so explain it to me again. So a house across the street has people come in every week or every 2 weeks or whatever, how many, because they're a VRBO.
yeah,
So there's a tax on what those people pay
right.
to come in.
And that money goes to a
And that-
county fund to help address wastewater.
I see.
When the state SRF fund, the one that I talked about previously, approves your project, that Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund is going to give us 25% principal forgiveness each year when we go to pay our loans.
I
So
see.
if you think about, potential debt payments on a $100 million project, and you're getting 25% of those principal payments paid, from these funds, it's going to save us a lot of money.
Sure,
But we
sure.
need to do the dirty work in advance
Sure.
without the SRF to get the SRF approval in the end.
Right. So are those funds coming in now through
So
Airbnbs and all
They
of
are,
that?
yep.
Yes.
And it's a significant amount of money.
I remember at the Cape Cod Chamber when they talked about it years ago.
Yeah.
So
And so there is a board at the county level that's been dispersing, once you have an SRF approved project, has been distributing money to towns to help pay those 25% principal costs.
I
And
see.
Sandwich will be able to take advantage of it when we actually have ones that apply.
I see. Okay.
So-
So, but our money from our Airbnbs, again, I have 6 on my street.
Yeah.
Not that I care. I really don't, other than the fact that they have no sense of community. Because they don't care who gets
Right.
elected. They don't care about anything other than going to the beach and the treehouse, which is great for the treehouse and great for our economy. They spend money here. That's a good thing. Very good thing. So what you're telling me is that right now they're already putting money in, and if we want to take advantage of that money, we need to get this process going.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yep.
I get it
And
now.
the WIFF allows the consistency of this program moving forward.
I
If
see.
we had to go to the town meeting and ask the voters to approve a certain amount of money for engineering to keep moving forward, there's no consistency. We could have
Right.
it voted against, voted for. This provides the continual, and we need to show adequate progress towards rectifying these issues for the Conservation Law Foundation, who has taken towns to court,
Right.
and for the EPA and DEP. So the WIF provides consistency of this program moving forward to pay for the engineering.
May I ask Bud a question?
Sure.
Okay, so a question. If the towns, this is my understanding, but I want you to clarify it and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But the law requires if the towns don't do anything, the state can require each individual homeowner to upgrade their septic system, which
Exactly.
is going to be a cost either way. Either you support the with
Well, it's a lot more than $72 to their taxes
Right.
a year.
Yeah, the state
Or-
would mandate the implementation of
Right.
nitrogen reducing systems, which have a
Right.
price tag of up
Right.
to
Yes.
$30,000.
Right, right.
And so I think, as Bev pointed out, like if we don't step to the table on our own volition and try to address things the right way, and they're giving us like 2 decades to do that. So I mean, it doesn't happen to happen. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have time to do it. But we can't wait too long. The state could step in and force us within a short period of time. Anyone in those nitrogen sensitive areas would have to convert their septic system, whether their current one was still working or not.
Right.
right now in Wellfleet, it's
Yeah.
stalling home sales.
Yeah.
What?
They are requiring homeowners to put in a nitrogen-sensitive system. It's costing $50,000 to $75,000 per owner.
Wow.
And it is stalling the sale of property. But sellers are concerned, buyers are concerned, who's going to pay for this?
Right.
So it's a big impact in Wellfleet.
And is it because they don't have a sewer system?
Correct.
I see.
I think one of the things that's difficult too is some of these higher technology systems haven't quite been proven to work. And so hypothetically, you pay $50,000 to $75,000, put that system in 5 years, like with all sorts of data, it's not working, you need to do more. It's
So the
not
ti-
going to stop there.
So the town will be told, you need to change and go a different direction now.
Right.
After you've already put in all this money.
Right,
And we're
right.
trying to avoid that. We're
I
not
see.
trying, we are avoiding that.
Do you think it's going to be a tough sell?
I think to the Cape's credit, and it's a lot of people, it's like the elected officials across the Cape Cod Commission, the local and regional press. I mean, how many wastewater articles have there been in the last, and it's not just been 5 or
Well,
10
I
years.
personally read
And
several
it's probably
million.
going to be like, for the last 20 years, we've been told like, this is coming, you need
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
now's
But for
coming the
our
time to do
community,
it.
but you have a sense of our community, all 3 of you do. You in a different light than the 2 of them because they're employees of the town. But what do you think? Do you think people are gonna get it? I mean, I think water is so important. We're a sole source aquifer. I know that I wrote a letter to my congressman when they wanted to put something out on the base, the machine gun range. And I said, what are they doing? You can't let them do this. I was one of those people. Water is very important to us. So do you think, though, the people in Sandwich, who are majority are now retired, our kids' population is dwindling, our family population is dwindling somewhat with kids in the schools, although it could go back up again, I suppose, but I doubt it. I don't know, will they?
Ironically, I have 2 environmental scientists in my family.
Yay!
That's good.
One who spent 20 years in the water cleanup, and the other who runs a wastewater treatment plant in
Oh
the
my-
Berkshires.
Oh my gosh.
And what they have seen over the last 20 years is dramatic. So for the future generation, as you said, you can't keep passing this down the road. It has to start somewhere. And I think we have an opportunity to start that and continue through to it. The benefit down the road for from the housing perspective,
And God only knows we need housing on Cape Cod.
we need housing, and people are afraid that there's going to be a big impact. But
Right.
the housing that we need is affordable housing.
Right.
The median price range of a house in Sandwich right now is $682,000.
I know.
And there's only 8 houses for sale
I know.
under that price. So where do our firefighters, police, nurses, teachers, young professionals, our elderly, where do they go? So with this infrastructure, also we can create more affordable housing in the form of accessory dwelling units, which the state just passed a law that you can do that with by right, which is huge. And so I think down the road, seeing the vision of the future for the Cape in general, not just the water, but the economy, the housing situation, the infrastructure is a basis for us getting there in the future for the next generation.
Sure.
I think Brad brings up a great point about, like, we talk a lot about the environmental impacts, which are enormous, and that is the driving force about why we need to do it. But it's going to give us so many more opportunities, whether economic development in our downtown area. You know, if the Webster was tied up to a sewer system, maybe they could put in more rooms because they're really restricted now.
I know.
You know, maybe some of those small businesses that we see on Main Street could get a little bit bigger and they could have housing above it. You know, there's a lot of different things we could do. Maybe you could add a bedroom onto your house that you can't now because your septic system won't allow it. And probably one of the best examples is that whole accessory dwelling unit concept. If you could build a small dwelling on your property that you could either rent out, or as we all get older and we live there and our kids live in the, I mean, there's different things
Right,
that we'd be
there's
able to do that we
scenarios,
can't
sure.
do now with a normal septic system.
Right, right. So it's $72 per year, not per thousand.
It was for the average valued home, which the assessing department has valued at just over $715,000.
Right, right.
It comes out to $72 a year.
$72 a year.
Yep.
And if those values change, will that change?
No, it should stay very similar to that as you
Okay.
go on. It's
Okay, even if the
Yes.
went up, it would stay the same, 72.
very close.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. And you're telling me, Dave, we need this because we need this.
Well, one, because, well, mainly people, you know, and you were asking about the community and whether they understand the need and would be supportive. I think they are, because, you know, look at the ponds as far as with cyanobacteria. That's due to nutrient overloading.
Oh, it is. See,
from
now
septic
I
systems.
didn't know what that came from.
And the example being people drive by Lower Shawnee Pond, you know, by the dam and all the algae in the buildup. That's from nutrient overloads from septic systems also. So I think, and as far as PFAS in our drinking water and the need now to filter that out, that's because it's all being discharged in our septic system. So I think people understand the need for that and the need to go forward to address it for the future. So I think people will be very supportive of that. And that's the environmental reasons. And again, to speak to the commercial reasons and the residential reasons, the benefits, it allows opportunity going forward.
Sure.
I think a great example is if you look at what's happened down Cape in the last 6 months, like we had said earlier, like Yarmouth and Dennis, both passed debt exclusions in excess of closer to $300 million. And in my understanding in Dennis, it passed unanimously at town meeting because I think there's been so much education and they're seeing firsthand the negative impacts of not doing anything.
Yeah.
And we know the writing's on the wall. You're going to have to do it. If you put it off for 10 years, the cost is just going to be that much higher.
I joke with Bud because of the ponds during the summer and for years, and they're dealing with it now too, as far as the closure of the ponds because of the, you know, cyanobacteria.
Right.
And I've joked with Bud saying, you know, in your capital budget, put in a community pool. because your ponds
Someday.
your ponds are just going to keep
Right.
getting worse. You're seeing it now. It will progress and get worse.
And I will say, like, we talk a lot about the sewer systems and your septic systems. As Dave was saying, the CWRMP, our Comprehensive Water Resources Management Plan, it looks at everything. We've actually been doing a study, which we're going to update the select board on soon, is like in Lower Champagne, where you get those huge mats floating in the summer and the odors. We were actually working with a company to find out, like, would the state consider us doing a dredge project? Because what's happened is all these muck has built up and nutrients on the bottom of the pond, and you need to get that out to make it healthy.
Oh, that's all those feeding all those geese, all those years.
It'd be a great test case in a relatively small area compared to some of our larger ponds. If we tried something unique and looked at alum treatments and other things that have worked elsewhere, if we combine those things, how much better could we make it? And if it works there, what could we do with the next one? And so I think there's a lot more than just wastewater.
Right. And that was paid for, that example was paid for by the WIFF because we had the money in hand to be able to move forward on it.
I see.
And we're looking at like drainage improvements around Lower and Upper Champagne.
And all the ponds.
And that would all come from the WIFF as well, like physical drainage improvements, so water's not
That's coming from
flowing.
the $72
it
that
is,
you're
and
only going to charge,
Think
right?
of all the water and runoff on Route
It's
130.
such an exciting subject.
And it pumps right in, so
People are riveted out there, I can
they'll
tell
be able
you.
to catch bigger, healthier fish.
Well, and you do have the shellfish in
huge.
the creek.
Yep.
And that's a good thing. The shellfish are a really good cleaning of water thing.
It's a great example where like 20, 30 years ago, DPW started applying for these state grants, and we'd get small grants, but we built up like 5 or 7 over like those 15 years and eventually got a larger grant from the federal government. And we changed all the drainage system in that area. And for the first time in like 30 plus years, we were able to open our shellfish beds.
But
And
shellfish
those
are a great way of
they're
cleaning
awesome,
water.
Awesome.
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, not what probably was
Yes.
going on before.
Right, yes. Oysters are very good at cycling
Yes,
out nitrogen.
yes,
Mashpee
yes.
uses it.
Yeah.
They're
Yes,
running
they
some
do. I
studies
know
for
they do.
that.
Yeah.
And yes, it does work, but it's not the answer.
No, it's
the
not
only
the
answer.
ultimate answer. The ultimate answer is human beings paying $72 more a year on their taxes so that we can put it towards all the engineering and all the projects that need to go to make this sewer come to light.
Yes.
And
happen.
I will say to you that
Yeah.
people coming here, our taxes are not exorbitant.
Well, no, if you live in Wellesley,
Well, a lot of people come from out of the area, and a lot of people don't even realize that there is a WIFF fund in their taxes.
Right.
So I'm so glad that
Yeah.
you educated everybody about that, because I do believe that
I don't think people know.
understanding it is being educated about it, and then you'll know the right thing to do.
I think too, and another good part about like tax bills that people pay elsewhere, in almost every other part of the country except for like 3 states in New England, school taxes come in a separate tax bill.
Yeah.
So a town tax bill does not include school services.
Right.
That's way more than half of our bill.
I know.
Because we all and it's our most important thing that we all pay for. So
Right,
it's
it's
critical that we
education.
do it, but it's almost like when you compare those bills from other states and then you factor in they're not even paying, school taxes as part of their community tax. It's interesting.
So tell me, Bud, so we're going to go to town meeting, and I think you've done a program on explaining the warrant. Is this a yes or a thumbs up or thumbs down at town meeting, or is this going to a vote?
So that's a great question. We had to get the yes from town meeting, state requirement, a certain number of days before the town election. So we actually voted and approved the extra 1% at town meeting in January.
Okay.
At a special town meeting.
I wasn't
So
there, I
the-
was sick.
So the vote this time
I
is on
voted for it.
the town election. It's Thursday, May 8th. It's ballot question number 1.
Okay.
And I'm paraphrasing. It says it in more legalistic terms, but will you consent to increasing your WIFF surcharge from 2% to 3%?
Okay.
So it's at the ballot, not at town meeting,
Not at
because
town
we
meeting.
previously voted
Right.
it.
And at that town meeting in January, it was very popular. I mean, there was discussion, but
Yeah.
it was overwhelmingly
Well,
supported.
that's good, that's good. And I don't want you to get into the warrant, because I know you've done an
Yeah.
explanation of it, but there are certain things at town meeting that we will vote on that will cost money, is that correct?
Yeah, it's I'm just stealing a line from the town meeting show that we just taped.
Yeah.
What's weird is there's like 22 articles on the warrant. Only one of them uses tax money differently than the prior year. It's our
I
big budget
see.
article number 2.
I see.
So like,
So we'll see all these people here, and then they're all going to walk out afterwards?
hopefully not, but like Article 2 funds our budget for the next year.
Yeah.
Importantly, there is an article, and I forget the exact number
That's
in the
all right.
warrant, where we're taking WIF money that we've already brought in, and we're taking $750,000 and appropriating it so we can, Dave and I and Heather can approve the bills to have our engineering company,
Get started.
work on all this stuff. So
Right.
we're constantly advancing the cause with the
Right.
money that's already come in that the public
Gotcha.
supported us spending.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
because part of the CWRMP, some of the things we've already done is like the high school. We're
Huge,
in the
yeah.
process of updating that plant. Bids were already put out, and they'll be starting work on that facility this coming summer. And at the same time, the Oak Ridge and the Forestdale School.
So do people know this, that we're already doing this?
We've said it, but I don't know how much it's gotten out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we need to tout that more because
Yeah,
It's part of the CWRMP that was
Right.
outlined.
it's part of what we're
actively-
already paid in.
Yeah,
Yep.
and it's actively going on at this
Right.
time.
and we wouldn't have been able to do those improvements without people's
Without the-
support.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yep.
sure.
So
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I think this has been interesting.
It's exciting.
Well, if we could get some affordable homes in here, I agree with you
I
120%.
would be, it's such a passionate project
Well,
for me.
I agree with you, and I think there's been out in Seattle, the Portland area, they do, a lot of them are out for people over a certain age, probably my age, but they do tiny homes around a green with a little garage or carport in the back, and on a green that they might have a community gardens and things, and people have front porches and they can see each other, and not always just, it can be also, first-time home buyers that can just get in and those kinds of things. And
Yeah,
it's a
it's-
wonderful concept. And for some reason here, they look at you like you're half crazy,
I
but
think
it's
a lot
not
of people
crazy.
are afraid it's going to be more rental properties, but that's
Yeah.
not the goal.
No, that's not,
Not
the goal.
The goal
No.
is to for our workforce and our older population that
Right.
needs smaller housing needs.
and my guess is on the example you gave, they wouldn't have been able to do that unless they didn't have sewering.
Oh, no,
And
and they
that's
do.
why they're able to
yeah,
do it,
I mean,
right?
let's face it, in
Right.
other parts of the country, they do
Right.
have it.
Yes.
So wastewater is not a burden, it's an opportunity.
Yes, it
Right.
is.
There we go.
There you go.
Wastewater is not I think we should put that on a t-shirt. WH2O is not a burden, it's an opportunity. I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, first of all, explaining it to me so I actually kind of understand it. And I think we hit all the high points, but it's $72. That's all we're looking at on a house that's currently valued at
Over
something.
700. yeah.
Over 700. So would it be less if the house is valued less?
It would be.
It'd
Yep.
be less if your house is valued less.
Yep.
Although find a house
If it's
is
more,
sandwich,
yeah, right.
If it's more, it's more. And our next show is going to be about all these people who came in during COVID, bought houses, went up and turned them in, left and turned them into Airbnbs,
Yeah.
went back to New York
Yeah.
City and turned them into Airbnbs. We need to have a discussion on that,
Yeah.
I think. Anyway, I just want to thank you all. You've been very forthright, very honest to us, and I appreciate it very much. And I get it.
Yeah.
So anybody out there, call me. I'll explain it all to you. Anyway, thanks again.
Thank you,
Thank
Melinda.
you.
Wow. Bud Dunham knows his stuff about wastewater and WIFF. Oh my gosh. And Dave Mason, oh, I'm so glad he's on board. Although retired, he's on board as our wastewater coordinator. And Bev Comeau, who's with the Cape and Islands Board of Realtors and also sells real estate in town, she gets the business perspective. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope you'll take away some information and be able to tell your friends and neighbors to give a watch to this because they'll learn something. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on another Cape Conversations.